On today's Newsmakers, are Iranians actually celebrating Israel's attack on their own country? And if so, why? We're joined by Lana Silk, CEO of Transform Iran, who is going to break down the incredibly fascinating situation inside Iran. With no further ado, here is Lana Silk. Well, I so appreciate you joining me today. There is a lot happening right now in the Middle East, a lot of moving parts, but there are some interesting reports coming out. When you have a situation where there is a war brewing or a battle brewing between two different powers, the assumption is always that the people within those countries are going to oppose the other side. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of that happening between Israel and Iran right now, but there are reports that Iranians are actually happy or sort of exuberant to some degree over what is happening. Is that true, and what are you hearing?
Yes, Billy, certainly the immediate reaction that we got from Iran was, for want of a better word, celebration. I mean, I've seen videos going viral on social media with young people throwing parties, literally as they watch the missiles coming down, people on their balconies doing shots in celebration. It's it's been surreal looking at that, thinking, wow, these are people under attack, and yet they welcome it. I've seen multiple messages of thanks, even personally to Netanyahu, thanking him for finally doing something about this brutal regime. Now we're a few days in, that's a little tempered by the immediate impact of war. Of course, people are living in it. And there are some real implications with food shortages, gas shortages. They've been warned to evacuate certain areas. They've been told there'll be no water or electricity. So there's definitely a price to be paid. But I think by and large, people are thinking it's probably worth paying it for what's hopefully coming next.
Well, and that's the thing. I think for the West and for Americans in particular, if somebody were to attack us internally, the idea that we would be thankful for it in any way would seem very foreign. And for those who don't know, and we cover this a lot at CBN News, and we've had you on to talk about it, but what is the situation within Iran that would lead people to have thankfulness over somebody coming in to essentially attack their own country?
Yes, it's a very intense situation in Iran that has led to this kind of unexpected response to being attacked. The people of Iran have been brutalized for decades now by this government. And a lot of people use the word traumatized, that there is so much trauma across the country that people are dealing with, from the implications of a controlling regime to the secondary implications of what people then do to each other when they're in such dire circumstances. So it's been tough on every level, from the freedom that we see them fighting for in the news with things like their headscarf and their voice, through to the everyday control and scrutiny that they live under. You know, their phone calls are monitored, their web activity is monitored. There's so many things that are outlawed. They're really choking under the hold of the government, and they have tried for freedom from under this regime and failed and paid a high price for it. So now the sentiment is maybe there's some more muscle behind it, with Israel really doing something about it.
How does this escalation? We've seen a lot of escalation in rhetoric, and last year we saw obviously Iran try to exercise their military muscle against Israel a couple of times. But how does this current situation change the dynamics in the Middle East? This feels very different.
It feels a lot more real, doesn't it, Billy? I
It
feel like there
does.
have been many years of lip service, many years of war by proxy. We had quite a change in circumstances last year when finally both Iran and Israel took very direct action that they hadn't. They'd only been talking about it for such a long time. And suddenly we were in uncharted territories when they're actually attacking each other on their own soil. And we wondered then if it would escalate. But the way they did it then was a lot more paced. You know, they both took a lot of time to leave a bit of a window between each activity. It felt like neither of them really wanted war, but they also wanted not to show a sign of weakness in response to the other. But this time it's been a lot more aggressive, a lot more back to back, and not really any kind of relenting on either side at the moment. It doesn't feel like it's going to let up anytime soon. So the rest of the Middle East is watching with nervousness, I would say, because people will get caught in the crossfire, and they're all cautious to see what will come of it.
You know, one of the big things with regime change, we've seen this a lot in the Middle East, is you end up with a terrible regime that gets removed, and sometimes what comes next is actually worse. Now, this is a complicated situation because, Iran, the regime, as you just described it, it's pretty horrendous as it currently stands. When you look at this situation, what are some of the cautions, as we sort of approach the idea of, and we're nowhere near there now, but this goal that many have, including many inside Iran, to topple the Iranian regime? What are some of the cautions maybe that have to be considered prayerfully as these sorts of situations develop?
Yeah, this is the important thing to consider now. It's something that we have been talking and praying about for many years as a ministry. For us, it's there's a dual dynamic here. There's the spiritual dynamic where we've seen in other situations, for example, in the fall of communism, where the church is so suppressed, it's growing in a persecuted environment, and then suddenly there's freedom. And people have this expectation that that freedom will lead to all these people that have been hungry for the gospel suddenly turning to Jesus. But what has happened historically is those people have been lost to other false religions in this sudden frenzy of freedom and all these voices and this sort of buffet of life's choices ahead of them now that they've never had access to before. As a Christian ministry, we're very cautious of this and preparing urgently so that when the church is free, the church is also ready with materials, discipleship programs, churches, believers in different regions, ready to respond to the need. But there is a political dynamic here too, Billy, and we've seen in the news with Reza Pahlavi and a lot of his followers and other organizations too, getting politically active and really rallying people to get ready to replace what Iran has today, this talk of a post-Islamic Iran. And in both cases, we mustn't be naive. We have to be ready to actually fill the vacuum with something good.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, Iraq and other, and every country is different and the dynamics are different. You had Saddam Hussein, obviously a brutal dictator. He's removed. And then you have a vacuum that opens the way to ISIS, right? And so there's so many dynamics here. But the fact that, Transform Iran, your organization has been prayerfully thinking about this is incredible. For those who don't know, talk a little bit about the work you do and how this current dynamic in the Middle East might even change the way you do that work. I'm just sort of curious how you're adapting to everything that's happening in real time.
We have some things that we've been preparing for a while that we don't share publicly in readiness for a different political landscape in Iran. A lot of the things that we do now will simply increase in scale for when we are free to move around in the way that we want to be. There are some things that we have in place that we think will continue to support. So the key is the digital church here. We have a large digital church network. Millions of people connect to it, but probably 20 to 25,000 regularly every month are part of that network. We don't see that suddenly evaporating. Suddenly, when Iran is free and more people have access to the gospel or feel that they can freely respond, that's the time for the digital church network to connect everyone and create this national community. So a lot of our ministries will continue to work. They'll just be more free. But we do have people on the ground, Billy, who are getting ready to be more proactive in their witness, in the way they rally people to the gospel, people who will be lost and hurting and confused, dislocated. Those people need Jesus more than ever in that situation, and the church needs to be the loudest voice.
Yeah, and a lot of the work you do, I would imagine it has to be done in secret and quietly, and those even engaging, because you can't just, as you were describing before, if you're a Christian, you can't shout that from the mountaintops in Iran. You have to very carefully navigate that, right?
Yes, exactly. So the people who are in Iran today are very covert in their physical activities. They connect mostly digitally. They're limited in their impact to their house church and their immediate environments. They have to be careful who they talk to and who they reveal themselves to. So that will go. And the big thing for me as I'm talking to you, Billy, is the children. The children of the Christian families in Iran are walking a really difficult double life because it's an Islamic education system that preaches and teaches Islam. They have to learn Islamic scriptures, Quranic scriptures. They have to recite the namaz. They have to pay lip service to being Muslim at school. They can't suddenly say, I can't study this because I don't believe in it. Imagine the freedom that these children will experience when suddenly they don't have to keep their faith hidden. It's an exciting prospect.
It is. And the danger too, anybody who has children knows how hard it is for children to not say certain things, right? Or divulge information. And so that road that you're speaking of is very difficult for the children and the families. And there's, I would imagine, a lot of fear embedded in that. And right now, a lot of opportunity for what is to come. Any final words, maybe even words of wisdom on how people could pray for Iran in this moment?
I would say this is a time of hope. That there's change that we have been praying for. There are some real practical possibilities that are happening here. Pray for both countries. Pray for wisdom in the leaders in Israel and how they progress towards the end that they are seeking. Pray for peace and a protection over the innocents in both countries. And keep praying for change. We want change. We do want change. We know there's a price to pay. We are praying that people will be protected from paying with heavy casualties. But we're looking to the other side of this and excited for God will do through a transformed Iran.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time and joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Billy.
That's all for today's Newsmakers. Make sure you head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel and cbnnews.com for more of the news you need to read. We'll see you again tomorrow.